Welcome and good evening to the City of Shakopee City Council meeting for June 4th, 2019. Item number 1, if we could call the roll, please.
Councilmember Brennan.
Here.
Councilmember Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Mars.
Here.
Councilmember Whiting.
Here.
Councilmember Contreras.
Here.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3, approval of the agenda. Any changes, Mr. Reynolds?
Nothing from staff, sir.
Counselor Whiting?
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Counselor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes. Item number 4, consent agenda. Are there any changes, Mr. Reynolds?
Not from staff, sir.
Thank you. Counselor Whiting, or
I'll make a motion to approve the consent business.
A second.
I have a second by Counselor Brennan and Counselor Lehman.
4D2 off.
Oh,
That's it?
Yep.
4D2 is coming off. Others? I do have an motion and a second. Before we vote, we would read the modified consent agenda into the public record. Mr. Reynolds?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. These are the consent agenda items for June 4th of 2019. 4A1 approves the minutes from the May 21st, 2019 meeting. 4B1 adopts resolution number R2019-063, which approves the final plat of Willows at Windermere. 4B2 adopts resolution number R2019-062, which sets the public hearing date to consider the vacation of public drainage and utility easements for the property located north of Eagle Creek Boulevard, south of Shenandoah Drive, and west of Veerling Drive at 12th Avenue East. 4C1 declares 7 forfeited vehicles held by the police department as surplus property and authorizes their proper sale or disposal. 4C2 declares listed property as surplus and authorizes its proper sale or disposal. 4C3 adopts resolution number R2019-061, which authorizes the renewal of a joint powers agreement with the Minnesota Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force. And 4D1 adopts resolution number R2019-052, which receives a feasibility report and calls for a public hearing for the Wood Duck Trail Reconstruction Project, which is CIF TAC 19 TAC 008.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I have a motion and a second. The modified consent agenda has been read into the public record. There would be no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Moving ahead to item number 5. Now I'd like to call on any resident that would like to come forward and speak on an item not on the agenda. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and welcome on an item not on the agenda. Seeing none, we will move ahead then to item number 6. Business removed from consent agenda, 4D2, and 12th Avenue Reconstruction Project. Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I had a couple of questions for staff, and probably engineering or somebody, but am I reading this right, that it says there's 2 properties that don't have an agreement at this point, and both are owned by the MMPA?
Mayor and council members, good evening. There are easements needed on the MMPA property. That's one property, and the second property is by the hotel, Hotel Motel right off of Disc Drive, different property.
is there 2 different owners on that?
2 different owners, 2 different properties, yeah.
Have both of them been contacted and talked with?
Mayor and council members, yes, they have been. For the hotel property, we've been working with them. We are working with our appraiser and getting a fair value for that. We've been in in contact with them for a while, and they've been good partners on this. I'm sure of dedicating it to the city. As far as I want to get the name right, the the Minnesota Municipal Power Agency parcel. We initially didn't expect the city to pursue that easement. We thought the developer would, through the Canterbury development. But we have since learned that that is not working out, so we are proceeding with obtaining that easement through our resources. But we have been working with them for quite some time now, and we are expecting the numbers I present as worst case. We have been in contact with them today, and we are expecting a big portion of that to be hopefully dedicated. So more to come, and we will update you more.
So the quick claim taking and eminent domain, which properties would they be used on? Would that be used on?
Mayor and council members, I don't expect to have to go down the eminent domain path. But that is a parallel path that we are asking you to approve tonight, because we do have a 12th Avenue project that is underway right now. And we do need these easements to complete that project. So if we do need to go down that path, I'm asking for your consideration and approval tonight. I don't expect to have to go down that path at all, because we do have good partners on this project.
Last question? So that would extend east of 83 on 12th Avenue?
This project is for the 12th Avenue reconstruction project, which is west of County Road 83. So we had the trail project that was east. We went and that was a simple trail project that we needed to get easements for. These easements are needed for the trail and for roadway improvements, but for the most part, it's because we're revising the roadway, it's impacted because of the revisions to the roadway, and not just because the trail exists there already. So we're revising the roadway, and we're needing a little more real estate to do the improvements that we have proposed.
Well, I'm still as confused as I was when I started.
So we're being asked, they're going to proceed with negotiations. They're asking for approval to use eminent domain if needed, but the update from Steve is a little more, sounds more prosperous than that we wouldn't need that, especially from the MMPA. Just that would be a last resort, and they're in full negotiations on that aspect. Councilor Whiting?
So if eminent domain was the path we ended up having to take, that takes quite a bit of time, doesn't it?
Mayor and council members, it does, and I would offer that this won't be the final step for eminent domain. I'm going to be able to report back to you in a short amount of time here that we have these easements, and we can cease with that parallel path. But we'll keep you updated as we go. So before we proceed with any of those further steps, working with the city attorney and our experts here, we'll keep you updated on those steps on the eminent domain path. But that's a little ways further down the road than them dedicating those easements to us. I expect to have those easements.
Thank you. Mr. Reynolds?
And the real ultimate issue here is one of timing. Because of the 12th Avenue project and the short time frame that we have to run these parallel paths. Normally, you wouldn't see that. You would see the negotiations happen, and if that was unfruitful, then you would come through with an eminent domain procedure if necessary. But because of the timing issues here, and I think it's exactly the right step, we're doing them both at the same time, with the ultimate hope is that, we'll never have to go down that path.
Okay, more?
The ultimate issue for me is the threshold of taking property by force.
No, and I get that, and I appreciate that. I think, the MMPA with their Shakopee Energy Park, city of Shakopee and the utility worked hard on that project. They're a good local partner. Hopefully they'll come to a resolution before that step. we're authorizing staff that they could go down that path, but as Steve mentioned, we would see more information back on any final.
Correct.
I think some appraisals are in the forthcoming or down the line here from that, so there would be another step before that, but we are saying that staff can use that, and hopefully we won't have to on just these couple of properties. But, so, Counselor Whiting?
Understanding the concerns here, but I will offer to approve Resolution R2019-060, authorizing offers of compensation for easements and acquisition by eminent domain as part of the 12th Avenue Reconstruction Project, CIF 19-004.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second by Counselor Contreras. But again, then if eminent domain were to be used, it would take another step here by the city council,
At least one.
at least one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Further discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1, thank you. I'd entertain a motion to recess for our EDA. Counselor Lehman?
Make a motion to recess for the EDA, Economic Development Authority meeting.
Second.
Second by Counselor Contreras. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Mr. President.
We'll call the Shakopee Economic Development Authority meeting to order for June 4th, 2019. Please make note of the roll. We're on to item 2, Mr. Lehman.
Mr. President, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and seconded by Brennan. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to item number 3, Mr. Lehman.
Make a motion to approve the consent business.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to approve the EDA minutes. Any discussion? Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 4, we have the EDA bill list for your review. We're not taking any action on that. And any questions on the bill list? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5. Mr. Lehman.
Mr. Chair, a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, July 2nd.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to adjourn to July 2nd at 7 p.m. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. We stand adjourned.
We will reconvene this City of Shakopee City Council meeting for June 4th, 2019, and we are on 9A1, 2018 Financial Report Audit Presentation.
Good evening, mayors, council members. I'll just introduce you to Andy Berg. He's a partner with Abdu Ike and Myers. This is the second year that his firm has been doing our audit. And I'll let him kind of go through the audit results, and we'll be available for any questions you have along the way or afterwards. So, thank you.
Thank you. Andy, welcome.
All right, thank you very much. I have a presentation to go through today. This slide kind of touches on what I'll go over. I'll go over what our audit opinion is. We'll look at each of the different funds of the city, starting with the general fund. We'll look at your other governmental funds, so your special revenue, capital project, and debt service funds. We'll look at your enterprise funds and then look at some different ratios over a 4-year period compared to other cities of similar size and other cities in Scott County. So the end result of our audit is that we issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued unmodified, a clean opinion, so the best opinion you can get. As part of the audit, we also gain an understanding of your internal controls. We don't test those controls or issue an opinion on the effectiveness of the controls. As part of the audit, we test 7 different areas of Minnesota legal compliance that the state auditor puts out there. So we issue a report on that and a clean report on Minnesota legal compliance. So now jumping into the different funds of the city, starting with the general fund. So on this page, we give you a a 4-year history of your ending general fund balance compared to your next year's budget as a percentage, and also your internal fund balance policy. You do have a fund balance policy of around 40 to 45%, which is indicated by the gray shaded bar. So you can see you're right in line with that policy all 4 years. The fund balance has increased each of the 4 years in line with your budget. So at the end of 2018, you're at about 45.3% of your 2019 budget. That number is important from a cash flow perspective. As you know, your main revenue source is your property taxes, which comes in halfway through the year. So if we look at the activity in the general fund, here we give you a summary comparison of your budget to actual amounts. You'll see revenue came in at about 28.1 million, higher than budget by 1.1, slightly over that. The main variance areas were in licenses and permits and charges for service. Your expenditures were under budget by about 781,000. The largest area under was general government. All departments were under budget with the exception of public works, mainly due to additional snow removal costs. So revenues over expenditures of about 2.3 million. You had transfers in of 263,000, transfers out of about 2.2 million, mainly capital related. So your total fund balance after the revenues over expenditures factoring in the transfers increased about 341,000, ending at 12.3 million. On the next slide, we give you a 3-year history of the revenues by source in your general fund. Like I mentioned, when we were looking at the fund balance, the main revenue source is your property taxes, that first group of columns. So the blue bars are 2016, gray 2017, and green 2018. So most of the revenue sources fairly consistent over a 3-year period. You can see the charges for service has increased each of the 3 years. Similar with your expenditures. Here we give you a comparison by type. Again, like the revenues, expenditures follow the same pattern each of the 3 years. Each of the areas also increasing, which correlates favorably with the increase in the budget that we saw when looking at the general fund. Now moving on to the other governmental funds, starting with your capital project funds. You do have a number of different capital project funds. We list them here, giving you a comparison of your ending 2018 fund balance compared to 2017. In total, you have about 8.1 million of fund balance at the end of 2018. The largest fund there is your capital improvements fund with about 6.4 million of ending fund balance. You do have your TIF district number 17. That does have a deficit of 1.8 million funded with an interfund loan to be paid back with future tax increment collections. That did improve about 364,000 during the year. The next largest fund is your Park Reserve Fund at just over 2.9 million, increase about 1.7 million, mainly related to park dedication collections during the year. Now, if we look on the next slide, we'll give you a comparison, a breakout of that 8.1 million by fund balance category over a 3-year period. So the first category there is your restricted. This is mainly made up of that park dedication money in your park fund. The assigned portion there, you can see that's been fairly consistent over the last 3 years. That's mainly internally assigned related to specific projects coming up, so your CIP plan. And then the unassigned, you'll see that's a deficit there, mainly related to that TIF fund that we talked about that's being paid back over time through an interfund loan.
Andy, if you can go back one slide. On the restricted, though, you said that that's a park reserve? We have other restricted funds, though, correct?
Yeah, there's some other restricted funds, but the majority of that, the green bar, is made up of that Park Reserve Fund, about 2.9 million. You do have some restricted funds in your special revenue funds, and then any of the TIF funds that have positive balances are restricted under those TIF plans.
Thank you.
So in the special revenue funds here, there you have 5 different funds. Looking at the graph there, you will see some restricted funds here. That's mainly your EDA funds. That has decreased over the last 3 years, ending in a deficit of about $821,000. You do have land held for resale, about $1.4 million in that fund. During the year, you did transfer out about $800,000 for projects, and you had about $1.3 million of projects, mainly redevelopment related, in the EDA fund. And then you have the 4 other funds there that fairly consistent from year to year. You do have a group of internal service funds for a number of different purposes. In total, you have about $42.4 million of ending net position, which is consistent from 2017. The majority of that's related to capital assets, so it's invested in capital assets. You do have an unassigned portion that's about $10 million, and again, looking at the graph there, fairly consistent compared to 2017. You do have 4 debt service funds with total bonds outstanding of about $32.4 million. We give you a 10-year history of the upcoming principal and interest debt service requirements. So there, we just recommend that the city continue to monitor the sources coming in to ensure that you'll meet your principal and interest payments. At the end of the year, you have total assets set aside in those funds of about $4.2 million, with the majority of that made up of cash and investments. On the next page is starting your enterprise funds with your sewer fund. So with this fund, we give you a cash flow from operations and a cash balance graph. So the top graph there gives you an indication of cash generated from operations. So in 2018, you'll see there was cash generated from operations, with the blue bar, the cash receipts, being higher than the gray bar, the disbursements. In 2017, you were about break even. Looking at the bottom graph, that's your cash balance graph broken out between unrestricted and then also your SAC funds, which is a gray. In total, you had about $8.1 million of cash and investments, a decrease from 8.3 in 2017. So the decrease from 2016 to 2018 is mainly capital related. You had capital expenditures of about $1.3 million in 2017 and about $1 million in 2018. Your storm drainage fund, looking at the cash flow from operations graph, you can see 3 of the 4 years you did generate cash from operations. In 2016, the disbursements were a little higher, so there was a use of cash. Cash fairly consistent from 2016 to 2018 at about $13 million. You did have about $619,000 of capital in 2017 and about $433,000 of capital expenditures in 2018. And then you have your refuge fund, basically financing the garbage carts purchased a number of years ago. So the green portion of the bar is your interfund loan payments. The blue is operating receipts. So the money coming in is paying back that interfund loan as intended. This graph gives you a 3-year history of your total cash and investments by category, so basically by all those funds we just covered. For example, the bottom blue portion is your general fund, the cash remaining fairly consistent. The biggest change over the 3 years is in the red portion of the graph, which is your capital project fund. So you did have some significant capital expenditures in the previous couple of years, so you can see the decrease in that from 2016 to 2017. Total cash, about $57.1 million at the end of 2018 compared to about $55.3 in 2017. Now moving on to some of the ratios, like I mentioned, we give you a comparison, 2 different peer group comparisons. The green bars, the class 2 cities, are the cities from 20,000 to 100,000, and then also all cities in the Scott County. And then the city of Shakopee is the blue line. So these first 2 graphs are property tax related graphs. The top one's your tax rate. You can see that's been fairly consistent over the 4 years with a little bit of a drop in 2018. And your taxes per capita increasing each of the 4 years presented by a little bit. Both of those under both the peer groups presented. The next set of graphs are debt-related. I'll cover the top one, the debt per capita. That's looking at your total bonds outstanding divided by the population. You'll see you issued some debt in 2016 that brought that up, and as you paid that down, if you don't issue any new debt, that'll continue to decrease as you pay down that principal.
Are you saying in your top graph there that other communities are leveraged more, have more debt? Is that what you're saying at the top graph?
The top graph is basically saying that they have more debt outstanding per capita.
And then this is with no regard to population, right? Just cities in Scott County and Class 2 cities, right?
The cities in Scott County are every city in Scott County. So the green, the Class 2 are in population.
Indifferent to population, right?
So the green is 20,000 to 100,000 within the state.
Counselor Lehman?
The big change between 15 and 16 from 208 to 948, that the sale of the bonds for the community center?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lehman, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Mostly, for the most part. There's other little things
Correct,
in there,
yeah.
but the bulk of it is that. Okay.
Continue.
All right, on the next slide, we give you a comparison of your governmental expenditures broken down by current expenditures and capital expenditures. The top one's your current expenditures. There you can see the blue bar increasing a little bit each of the years in line with the trends of both the peer groups. The bottom one there, the capital expenditures, you can see in 2016 kind of related to the bonds we were just mentioning that were issued. You had some bigger projects, some of those building projects in 2016. So that number will fluctuate depending on what type of projects you have going on, building or street projects. These next two ratios, this is giving you a comparison of your expenditures by program and your revenue per capita. It's comparing the city's 2018 data to the peer group's 2017 data, so not a year-to-year comparison due to the peer group 2018 data not being complete yet. With both these graphs, I think you just can draw a conclusion that your revenue sources and your expenditure sources kind of fall in line with the same types of other cities in the peer group average. You know, for example, the bottom graph there, your per capita revenue, like you know most cities have their main revenue source of taxes, so you see that right in line with the peer groups. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions on any of the information or any questions related to the audit.
Questions? Mr. Reynolds?
No questions, Mr. Mayor, but there are a couple things that I do want to point out because I think they're incredibly important. On page 17, Andy, if you could go there, please. So our tax rates are lower than Class 2 cities in the state, as well as cities in Scott County. Our taxes per capita are lower in both of those as well. And then, Andy, if you could go to 18, our debt per capita is lower than both Class 2 cities and cities in Scott County. And finally, our debt service is lower as well. Those 4 slides say more about this organization's fiscal responsibility than I think anything else that you're going to see in this particular presentation. And that's incredibly important to point out. And frankly, it has a lot to do with the quality of staff that you have and their fiscal responsibility. You know, we've talked about what our budget was last year, and every department except for Public Works, and that was simply because of some stormwater-related issues, was below budget last year. That's an accomplishment.
Counselor Whiting?
You know, I'd like to jump off on that comment and congratulate staff. Mr. Nelson, you've done a great job with your staff. Mr. Reynolds, your leadership in that part has been amazing. People really need to take a look at the slides you pointed out because other cities aren't doing that. And I'm very proud of you.
Counselor Lehman?
Couple of questions. The slide on page 17. The taxes per capita. If I go to page 19 of the actual book, on the bottom of that page, it shows revenue by source, government activities, 48% by taxes, 3% franchise tax, 4% other tax. What is the other tax?
Darren?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lehman, I believe there is franchise tax are in there. There would be,
The franchise tax
it's
is
like the
separate.
gravel, there's a gravel tax. There's a small little bit in there for gravel tax. There's,
The EDA.
it's the lodging tax. Lodging tax is the biggest
Just a
portion of that.
pass-through, though.
Right.
Which is a
But it
pass-through.
shows up as a tax there.
Yeah, that's what that mainly is the lodging tax.
Okay, so the 4% other tax is lodging tax?
I believe that's a good majority of that piece of it.
And again, that is a pass-through that goes straight to,
It's like 300 grand or
Yep.
north of 300 grand.
Okay, and then when I look at this pie circle, and then I go back to 17 taxes per capita and the tax rate, I see the tax rate is either the same or slightly dropping, yet the taxation per capita is increasing. So I'm going to assume, and you correct me if I'm wrong, please, that the 48% taxes shown in this pie chart is the general levy taxes, and it does not include the 3% franchise tax. And does your per capita tax include the franchise tax?
So the per capita tax includes all the taxes, your property tax, your tax increment financing, and your franchise taxes.
Okay.
The taxes on page 19, the 48%, that's
Oh,
for
hang
your
on.
general property taxes and your debt
Let's stay on
levies.
17, so, but the tax rate shown here is strictly on the general levy. So that doesn't include the 4% or the 3% in a tax rate, because it's a separate tax and it's not levied to the taxpayer.
The franchise taxes would not be included in the tax rate, correct?
Okay, how about the 4% other tax?
The lodging, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lehman, the lodging tax wouldn't. If the TIF taxes are probably in that other taxes as well
The
too.
yeah, the TIF is probably in that other taxes too.
And that would be part of the property tax rate. So,
So a portion of the other tax is reflected, well, the tax rate is only going to reflect what's the general levy tax.
the tax rate is a property tax. That's specifically related to property tax, whereas there's other taxes that are based off of different
Okay?
scenarios.
Do these other taxes cause the per capita tax increase?
Might skew that. I mean, if we have a tax like the lodging tax, it's a pass-through that I think is
Or the energy tax?
north of 300 grand. Divide that by the population, it might skew that up even though that 300 plus $1,000 doesn't even involve the city because it's a pass-through.
and all of these are apples to apples.
Right.
Comparisons, so,
I just want to make sure I understand exactly what I'm looking at.
okay.
So yeah, if your general levy stayed flat but your franchise taxes went up, that would affect your taxes per capita in this calculation.
But it doesn't affect the tax rate,
Correct.
even though your tax rate went up because it's a different source of tax.
Tax rate went down.
Your taxation.
That's
went up.
important to,
Right, tax rate is only the
Tax rate has
amount
went down the
on
last 4
property,
years.
even if there's other taxes on the person per capita. Okay, I get it.
I think I found these graphs on 17 with the tax rate lowest in Scott County, lower than the class 2. Even the taxes per capita, with that graph, I question too a little bit. I actually focused on the dollar amount, 522, compared to other cities in Scott County. Also, I felt those were very powerful for our conservative community. And even on page 19, when we look at expenses per capita, current expenditures and actually capital expenditures as well, both of them, compared to other communities. When would we have, we're in June of 2019, when would we have that data for the other communities for 2018?
Mr. Mayor, most cities have to have their audits done by June 30th, so we really wouldn't probably get that information until September, October timeframe. So it's not really available at this point or even close to available at this point, so.
And let's not forget that last year, we were the only city in Scott County to deliver a tax cut. And we're the only city that I'm aware of in the Class 2 cities. I don't know, you may know better than me, and those that you've audited, of whether or not there's been any other tax cuts. Well, I guess you wouldn't know it for 2019 yet, but that's an important piece as well.
Other questions of Andy? If not, thank you very much for your presentation. I like the way the slides have evolved over the years. And it is truly, like Mr. Reynolds said, getting more to apples comparisons. You know, Scott County cities, Class 2, dollar amounts in a chart graph form. Very nice. And I do appreciate the bar graphs versus the pie charts that sometimes look harder to read. Go ahead.
You triggered a good question. The Class 2 cities, are those the same cities we compare ourselves to regularly?
We have a certain set of cities that we use as comparable cities. These are statewide Class 2 cities, so this is probably, I don't know how many cities are in Class 2, but there's
Different variations.
dozens compared to the 12 that we normally
That's
compare
an
against.
average of all of the Class 2 in the state.
Right,
Correct.
right,
Big wide average.
right.
Right.
Counselor Contreras?
Just one more time, Mr. Nelson and staff and Mr. Reynolds, thank you for all the great work, keeping our financial books nice and tight and everything in order. And with that, I'd like to make the motion to accept the 2018 audit and the accompanying reports as presented by the audit staff from APCO, Eric, and Mayers.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Counselor Contreras and a second by Counselor Whiting. Further discussion, Counselor Lehman?
Will the NA numbers be filled in August, September, or will they be blank and we'll see them next year?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Lehman, you'll see them next year.
Okay.
But we can also, once we get those, we can pass those on to council because they
Just
are.
a couple of those
Yep,
slides.
absolutely. I don't know when they're available, but we can.
Yeah, we'll have to work with auditors, but typically they do work on school audits now this time of year because they end on June 30th, and so they don't get back into cities until closer to the end of the year again and such like that, so I'm not sure when they gather that information.
It's not pressing to our operation, it's just nice for the comparable.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned when we talk about we're gonna get them numbers because it's gonna take a lot to compile all the Class 2 cities in the state on their capital projects, and I'm not sure I wanna spend the money to do that.
Well, they'll certainly be available next year.
Right.
Right.
And I think for the upcoming budget cycle and such like that, we'll take a close look at our comparable cities as well, too, to make sure that that's a little bit closer to apples versus a statewide piece of that, so.
Good plan.
Motion on the table. Thanks again, Andy, to you, your
Thank you very much.
organization. Another clean audit, I believe that's 3 in a row for our community, so it says a lot. Appreciate it very much. Darren?
Just take one quick minute. I'd like to thank Andy and his staff for doing a great job as well, too. It was our second year when, obviously, the second year goes a little bit smoother than the first year. Not to say the first year didn't go smooth, but I think we got a good working relationship on understanding everything there. And I'd also like to thank the departments. It's just not the finance department that puts together the financial report. It's all the departments that are out doing their due diligence to make a good, strong financially strong city on that end of it and such. And my staff as well, too. Melissa Schlingman, my accounting manager. I mean, she puts together that financial report every year, and it's probably one of the few cities in the state that actually the auditors walk in and they get a book handed to them. A lot of times it's the auditors doing a lot of that prep work for staff on that end of it. So kudos to her and the rest of our staff for their efforts. So
framework.
Great, thank you for those comments. Motion on the table and a second, further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion passes.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Thank you, Andy.
Let's move ahead then to 9A2, strategic planning, and Nate.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, and you can thank Mr. Reynolds for talking me out of my idea to do like a 90-minute academic presentation on strategic planning and go with 3 slides. Also Darren, because 3 slides, right? Okay.
Punching bag here.
So what I'm here to do today is to ask you to make the affirmative choice to move forward with strategic planning for the city of Shakopee. And it's something that kind of follows on the tails of the presentation that I gave you about community survey. It also ties a little bit into some conversations that I've been having with the leadership around here. I'll tell you that a great number of your leadership have been involved in organizational strategic planning and have found value in it. And it's important for us so that we get strong direction and guidance from the council that we can rely on a consistent basis over time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why strategic planning is important. I'm going to talk about what strategic planning is, and then I'll talk a little bit about the process that we envision. Strategic planning is important because it promotes strategic thinking, acting, and learning. Thinking strategically is about thinking about more than what's right in front of your face. It's about thinking 2 to 5 years out. It's about acting strategically, making decisions, thinking about the end in mind, and intentionally learning about things that are going on around us, taking in data, taking in information about the environment so that we are putting it into our operations and putting it into our decision making in a very strategic fashion. It overall improves decision making. It improves decision making because we're thinking in the long term and not just the near term. It results in enhanced organizational effectiveness, responsiveness, and resilience. One of the things that I'm working on right now is called the Baldrige Excellence Builder. And the Baldrige Excellence Builder, when you finally complete it, if you actually become a Baldrige community, you actually can prove out that you're 8% or you are almost 80% more efficient and effective than other organizations. Strategic planning is a core piece of being a Baldrige community. Improved delivery of public value. It means that we're focused on the things that are most important to the council, that are going to make this community the great place to live, work, and play that we want it to be. And then there are direct benefits to the people involved. And by that, I mean to the council, in that you have a firm hand on the rudder to make sure that you know that the direction that we're going is where you want us to be. For staff, because we have that to fall back on a day-to-day basis. There are also studies out there that prove that a strong strategic plan improves employee morale, improves employee productivity, and improves overall engagement across the organization. Those are just a couple of examples of why it's important. I could definitely dive into the academics of it if you want, but probably not. So strategic planning, and this is the one academic piece that I'm giving you, is a deliberative, disciplined effort to produce fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organization is, what it does, and why it does it. And that's from John M. Bryson from the University of Minnesota, Hubert H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs. But really what I think it is for you is it a means for you to chart a course towards longer term objectives and to establish clear organizational accountability at the policy level. We have a comprehensive plan, a parks master plan, and you do the annual planning for projects. There is a need to tie all of those things together. And what the strategic plan does is give you that vision for 2 to 5 years. It ties the longer 2040 plan back towards the 1-year plan that we work on every year. It's a tool for staff to use to ensure that our day-to-day actions are aligned with the strategic direction of the City Council. Not that we don't do that right now, but it's a whole lot easier when it's written down and clear, and there are measurements that we can use to make sure that we are moving the needle in the right direction. So in order to try to bring this down so that you can fully understand what it is that I kind of envision and Bill envisions where we can land, I'm going to pull up an example from another nearby community that's somewhat similar to us, and I'll encourage you to kind of look at the framework as opposed to the content, because the content for us is going to be a little bit different than this community. The framework, I think, will end up being somewhat similar. This is the strategic profile report for the city of Minnetonka. This is available on their website if you just Google Strategic Profile Report Minnetonka 2018. And I'll skip over some points except for it starts off with their mission and their vision and their guiding principles, which are the same as values. And these are the things that, and we have some employees who used to work for Minnetonka who can still recite those guiding principles. Or maybe not those, but at least some other ones that they have, because they're that important to the city of Minnetonka. Right here is probably the most important piece of the strategic plan overall. It establishes the major goals. So just for example, the major goal in Minnetonka is to be responsible stewards of the city's physical assets, human capital, and financial resources. It's a similar major goal to something that I would imagine the city of Shakopee would have, and something that I think that the city council could get behind. But then it goes a little bit further and talks about key strategies and what those key strategies are that will support that major goal. So if you look at this, it actually, and you think about our 2040 comprehensive plan, there are a lot of things that are listed right here for the city of Minnetonka that have some similarities to things that we have in the 2040 comprehensive plan, to some of the bigger annual objectives that we have. So we're not too far away from being able to establish something like this. This talks a little bit about their Imagine Minnetonka process, which I don't think that we need to do because we just went through Envision Shakopee. But I would want to show you, they have these signals for the future, which are basically things that they are key measures that they have decided are important for them to kind of decide what is the future of Minnetonka going to look like, primarily from a demographic sort of standpoint or an economic sort of standpoint. And the strategic doing, this section to me is probably the most important section because it takes those key strategies and it distills them down to a couple of key measures and an annual report on project progress, the projects that we're doing, the actions that we're undertaking in order to advance that key objective. So if you think about this, the hierarchy is mission, vision, values, major goals, key strategies, measures, projects. When all of those things are laid out and very clear, we can create what's called organizational alignment so that all of our departments, all of our staff are working in alignment towards the same goals and strategies. So here in Shakopee, I think we don't think that this is going to be a really long process. We think that for the most part, we could probably accomplish it in one work session, maybe two. But what we would propose to do is to obtain an outside consultant to help facilitate the process, to work with both staff and the council, to put all of the information that's important into that framework of mission, vision, values, major goals, key strategies, measures, and projects, so that we can put it all together. And then we would work between the staff and the consultant to organize information. We'll use the comprehensive plan, the Parks Master Plan, and other plans that we have to prepare for a workshop with you. We'd have a workshop with you, and then the council would adopt the plan. Anticipate that this could all be done within the next 2 months. I'm not sure how long the timeline you thought was, but it shouldn't be too much of a heavy lift. But at least from my perspective, having been in several organizations where my sole focus has been on getting a strategic plan into place and then concisely executing that strategic plan. And from talking with your leadership throughout this organization, we strongly believe that having that connection between the long-term plans and the annual planning that we do, which is budget and the key projects that you do every year, is of great value to this organization and to you as a council and the community as well.
A lot of these larger pieces have pretty much been completed. The comp plan is out for review at the Met Council. The Park Master Plan is, I think we're on the cusp of seeing that. Obviously, council goals and priorities, and just tie them all together into a strategic plan based off of 0 to 5 years.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councilor Whiting.
No, you gave a nice example of one that had measurable, points in there and that's what I think is key to having a good strategic plan is having some timeline for it and having those measures, whether it's economic or possibly through some surveys if that's how we want to look at some of those measures. But I think that's important for this organization. We've heard it many times over the years. We've actually done a few of these in the past and with mixed results, I think. But I think it's key to have a person like you or a consultant that's going to know how to operate these and get the results that we're looking for, at least the measures we're looking for.
Mr. Reynolds?
I once had a mentor who asked me a question and said, well, how's your organization? Oh, it's great. Well, how do you know? Well, how do you know? And you're right, Counselor, if without those measures, you have a gut feeling. We can talk about the bits and pieces, our financial strength. We can talk about, our economic diversity and the importance of that is to the community. We can talk about other things, but we don't have the measures in place to be able to say year after year that we're moving the bar. The one thing that we are aware of is, and this goes back to our citizen survey, we do know that if we put effort in certain areas, such as customer service, that we can move that bar. But we shouldn't have to rely upon a 2 to 3 year survey to do that. We need to be able to track that, on a monthly, 6-month basis, and then be able to show that that's actually taking place. And, if that ends up being a key metric, then we will measure it, and then we'll be able to present you then that data. All the data is not going to be good, much like our survey, but then we can focus on those areas where we know we need to adjust and improve.
Counselor Whiting, follow up?
Yeah, a little follow-up. Along with that, I think having a couple options for internal audits will be helpful too. In certain cases, maybe we target a few different areas that we want to just take a test on every 4 to 6 months, whatever we decide is important. But
Counselor Lehman? Or Counselor Brennan?
I think planning and strategic planning is very important for our community. And it's just not for the staff, but it's for the council and also for the residents to understand that we're all working together for a common goal. But what I want to, question I have is, how long does the strategic plan stay in place? And what do you do if you have people that are different who come on the council or different staff members? Is it as like a working plan and is constantly changing?
Mr. Mayor and council members, with the comprehensive plan, for example, you have to, have 4 of 5 council members in the Metro Council to approve it. A strategic plan is an annual review or whenever the council wants to pull it up. And so what I would envision is that we do have these key metrics that we follow on a fairly consistent basis. And when we see those metrics move, whether good or bad, we bring it back to the council and say, well, what do you want to do now? Mm-hmm. And I could probably come up with several examples from the past. But that's really up to the council. This is truly the council's plan. This is how you give staff direction and decide where we need to resource. If the needle moves the wrong direction in pavement quality, then the council can say, we want to be better than that, and we need to resource that one way or another. Mm-hmm. And that can happen monthly, annually. It's up to you.
I have one more question. I remember when we were doing our annual goals, the Baldrige plan or the Baldrige plan, is that what it is? Was on there, and we voted to approve that. And I think that this is just a portion of that, so I would also support that, this strategic planning.
This is 1/7 of Baldrige, which I will, with Mr. Reynolds' support, bring back, but that's a longer lift than I kind of expected, frankly. So,
Councilor Lehman.
I'd like to get a copy of your 3 PowerPoint slides, if I could.
Yeah, I'll send those out tomorrow.
Certainly don't have a problem with doing a strategic plan. But I think the key to a successful one, since I've been through many of them, can you back up a slide? Is the top paragraph. What is this organization? What is it that it does, and why does it do it? them questions have to be answered first. And it is fluid. All strategic plans are fluid because you may have a benchmark here that you're trying to get here, and when you get to here, you may focus on something else, but you have to maintain that one to here to be successful. And other things come into play that weren't on the original list of things of importance, where things change in society, whether rollerblading or skateboarding or bocce ball or whatever, things just change. And you incorporate them changes. Maybe it's email, maybe it's Twitter, maybe it's social media, maybe it's something 20 years from now that's much different. You're going to incorporate these changes as tools to achieve something. So you're constantly going to be going back and changing either how you achieve the goal, how you measure the goal, what is the goal. They all are kind of fluid.
Mr. Reynolds?
And two points to build on that. First of all is that, flexibility is always key because things change. And there are times where we may be focused on something, for example, as a key measure, and then something happens that totally takes it off the table, and it's like, okay, it's no longer a key measure. The other thing is that when we're looking at all the different tools, there are tools out there that we have no idea, in 5 years, that suddenly may become something that we rely upon greatly. And that will have an impact. But don't confuse with the ultimate goal with how we get there. We're asking you to set the goal. We're all going to try to figure out how to get there. You point us in the direction we need to go, and then it's up to all of us to get together and say, okay, how are we going to do it, and how are we going to measure it? And then ultimately we come back and say, this is what we've come up with. This is how we believe we can measure it, ask for your approval, and then report back to you on those issues. And then if we need to, be flexible as part of that process.
I think for me, Councilor Lehman here on this slide that he pulled back on, I like all those things, but for me, the last 2 bullet points, a mean for the city council, which is us, to chart a course, longer-term objectives, to establish clear organization accountability at the policy level. We're the policy setters here. And also a tool then for staff to ensure those actions are aligned with the strategic direction from the city council, because we're the policy decision-making board. So I think in combination, I like this approach. Councilor Lehman?
I think the critical piece that's missing in your statement is the objectives. We set the objectives. If we say we want to do X, Y, Z, and we want that to be primary, they have to come back with the policy to make that happen.
Well, and it says that for the city council to chart a course towards longer-term objective. Yeah.
But we have to decide what that objective is. Your objective could be to grow the city, double the city every year for the next 10 years.
Well,
Probably not a reasonable one, but it's just an example. How do you achieve that?
Yeah, and here's one that I refer to, and Darren's immediately going to stroke out when I say that. But let's say we're going to have a tax cut every year for the next 5 years. If that was an objective, that ultimately, now that would be a very difficult thing to do. But if that's a city council objective, then we would try everything we could in our power to make that, and we would come back with the options to be able to make that happen. I'm not saying that that's possible. I'm just throwing that out as
I think we were talking about things that change or becoming, more efficient and more effective has been a big buzzword for all organizations for the last 10 years. Years ago, we used to do sanitation, rebuilds with the old style pipes and stuff. Along came lining of that didn't exist 20 plus years ago. There's a disruptor of that industry that makes it more efficient and effective that wasn't known 20 years ago. Today, it's actually becoming more commonplace.
And
And
extending the-
saving municipalities a lot of money.
And extending the lifeline of the pipes
And extending
underground
the life.
by an exceptional amount of time.
Well, and it reduces the cost of the road recon.
Yep.
The key, there's multiple keys to this, at least in my mind, is you first have to agree on what it is government is supposed to be doing and why. That's the first bullet point. And then you have to put a course out and list objectives of what it is you want to achieve with the things that you're charged with doing, and why do you want to achieve them objectives. Then we figured out how we get there. And we're not going to be figuring out the tools like Mr. Reynolds says. They're going to figure out the tools and bring options forward to how to achieve those things that we deem our responsibility as government, and what are our key objectives to achieve over 5 years.
Counselor Contreras, did you want to weigh in here?
Well, I'm all in favor. I believe we should have these, this planning done. I mean, I believe they're asking for us to guide them, and if we can team up together and give them some ideas, I believe we should do it. I mean, we do have to kind of brainstorm together and see what we can come up with. Oh.
Counselor Whiting?
Well, we know that you could come up with 5 different opinions, but whatever we come up with the majority is what we'll have to go forward with, and I think that's important to remember. You never get everything you want out of this, but this is just the starting of a process. So with that, I would make a motion to direct staff to prepare for strategic planning during the period of June through August 2019.
A second.
I have a motion and a second, and then I apologize. Counselor Brennan, did you have a comment?
No, I was going to make the motion.
That's fine. Counselor Lehman?
Mayor, my only concern with the timeline is that these short summers of Minnesota, unlike Texas and other parts of the country, people are typically gone these 3 months of the year, or 2 months. It might be difficult to have full participation.
We will be flexible with those dates. We just wanted to put some targets out there. We still have to, I have a consultant in mind that I've worked with in the past that Nate is also familiar with, and I've yet to sit down and talk with him about his availability. So this is just kind of a
Starting point.
putting a dart on the board.
I can amend my motion to add with flexibility.
Is that okay with a second?
Yep.
Further discussion? Discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you all. Before us, 10A, the city bill list for our review. And 10B, liaison administration report.
Mayor, I
Oh,
did have a
question on the bill list.
I did have 2 questions on the city bill list. The finance, 60%, red arrow down.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
well,
I told you it would come around sooner or later.
it did the same thing last year.
County for our assessment services, so they'll be ready for a few months.
And the other one was natural resources, 73%.
That's the tree trimming contract that we
Tree
Okay, that's
did
right, it was
earlier this year.
carried over.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, the 2 items that Counselor Lehman brought up, the same thing happened last year to both the finance department and the natural resources on the same issue, so.
He shook his finger that time, too.
Well,
I'm watching with one eye.
all right. Thank you for that. 10B, liaison, Counselor Brennan?
I went to the ribbon cutting for Christine Tierney's studio, which is opened on Lewis Street. And it's so great to see somebody who has a dream and they've come to Shakopee to fulfill their dream. It was a great opportunity to get to know her better and the rest of the community. I really support her and her venture, and I think it'd be great to have in the community. I went to the Scale Educational Workshop on economic development, transportation, and housing in Scott County. It was pretty much an overview of what Scott County is doing and It was pretty informative. I went to help paint the park on Sunday with the JCIs. We went to Huber Park and painted and waterproofed the wood on Huber Park. And it's a very sticky job, so it took me a good day to get this all cleaned off. But it was great. I really appreciate that the JCIs are doing that. And then yesterday I went to the swearing in of the 4 firefighters for our fire department. That's it.
Thank you. Counselor Lehman?
Last night was Spuck. Naturally, I left my notes at home, so I'll do the best I can off memory here. I think the October completion target is October completion date of the Windermere Well-
Pump station and.
wells and
Pump station.
pump station.
Water lift station.
Oh, water
Yep.
wells. 2 power outages. 2 of them were at Three Rivers Park. Other one was a single resident, single customer. What else? Oh, the big item of talking about is they're taking on a pretty substantial challenge of a website update. Overdue, I will add. We did go through there at the meeting, and if you click on commissioners, the top one, you get the commissioners and their bios and their emails, but if you click on the one in the drop-down, it takes you to one that says a password is required. So both of them are there, and it's
Difficult.
just not
Yep.
user-friendly. They talked about, what it is they wanted for their website and stuff, and they did have the city's website pulled up as one example compared to different styles and stuff. Cities is actually really nice and workable, user-friendly, I would say. How do you pronounce the name of people that did ours? Granius or something like that?
Granius.
Granius. Didn't know what it cost the city. I couldn't recall that. I told them, their staff, to contact our staff to see what that costed to get a ballpark. I think the cities is probably more involved with a lot more tentacles than what Spuck would need. But they're also looking at the long term of how to incorporate other things later into it. So they are thinking long term, and they're thinking pretty hard about it. They do have a list of, narrowed down list of what's important to have on that site. Probably going to be a year or longer, so they're going to take a phased approach if that's possible once they talk to people that do all that stuff and rebranding and logos and updating and somebody that's capable of doing the future stuff too, so that they can have a partner throughout the process. So looking forward to them contacting our folks, because ours, I think, is really good. I like our website. I like the usability of it. I like the information, and it's updated, and it can do quite a bit. So that was probably the highlight that I took out of the meeting. I don't know if there's anything connecting things between the two development-wise or whatever that might efficiencies. That's something that our staff can talk to their staff about. They said they did want to talk to our folks about our website, so look for that to come your way. All righty, that's all I have, sir.
Counselor Lehman, thank you very much. May 22nd, I attended the SCALE workshop as well with Counselor Brennan. Last night, attended the swearing in of 4 of 5 firefighters, brand new. That brings us up to currently full staff on that. The other firefighter couldn't attend, and I think he'll get sworn in Thursday, I think. Counselor Contreras, Counselor Brennan were there. The fire department and their staff do a nice job when they swear in those firefighters, and they actually have much like the police, they can have a family member come and pin them, so that's a nice touch. And that's it. Outside of tomorrow, going to go to the groundbreaking for the county, and I think that's at 3 o'clock for their expansion. And that's my report. Counselor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 22nd, I attended the Minnesota Valley Transit Authority meeting. A lot of discussion on some of their capital improvements of their transit stations. It's amazing what damage can be done to those buildings, but a lot of discussion on the legislative bonding and the suburban transit providers, scrambling for those dollars again on the transit side. So hopefully all went well with that, and that's all I have.
Can I ask a question? That MVTA gonna make an upgrade in Dakota County, Apple Valley for their rapid bus station situation? They're gonna expand that because it's so popular?
There hasn't been, there's always talk of changing routes and things like that. They haven't had any new added routes, but maybe some modifications. But actually, the money's kind of going to the transit stations.
Transit station, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of their capital improvement project. But I can look more into seeing.
No, I saw that, and it got me thinking more, the MVTA is a great organization, and I just want to make sure some of those dollars come, west of 35W.
There was, they're working on a grant for the 495, which is the route that comes to Shakopee. Mr. Reynolds graciously supplied a letter of support for that. And so we are trying to enhance. Remember, that was a project that was a kind of a practice project.
Pilot.
Yeah, pilot project. And it's been very supportive. Of course, it's hit and miss with ridership and you can try and massage those hours as you can. But as the city grows, as our business community grows, that's going to be more and more important to us. So we need to keep that 495 rolling, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Contreras?
Yep. For the Shakopee Diversity Alliance, just they're continuing to work for the, just trying to find volunteers and for the entertainment for the International Festival. I mean, that's still in works. And then last night, again, just the swearing in of the new 4 firefighters. That's it.
What's the date on the International Festival again, do you remember?
August, it's the first Friday, so August 3rd, I believe, if I'm not mistaken,
What do we got?
I think.
Always a
August
good-
2nd.
Second, sorry, August 2nd.
Oh, no problem. Always a fun event.
Yes.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you very much. And our administration report, Mr. Reynolds.
Two
How's
things.
the knee?
Yeah, knee is still there. The two things for the future. First of all scale executive committee meetings will now be held in the city of Shakopee at City Hall. Our first one is this Friday at 7:30. Feel free to join us if you can. I have promised to have coffee available. So, and those happen monthly. And secondly, Darren just can't get enough of talking about the budget. So tomorrow, we have 2 budget listening sessions. Mr. Nelson and I will be presenting. The first is at 10:30 here at City Hall. And for those of you that in the audience that cannot make that, at 6:30 p.m., we will give an encore presentation. And this is really, first of all, this is the start of our budget cycle. And I think it's very important that we start that cycle by sitting down and talking to the public and listening to the ideas that they might have, or just educating them on the process and what kind of we see generally at this point as it stands. I forwarded the updated slideshow to all of you last week, or maybe it was earlier this week. And we'll go through that and hopefully have people that come in that have some ideas. I've done this in the past in other places. In the past, I have used ideas that have come through from these sessions and incorporated them into the budget. And it is an important piece, and it's our starting point for our budget cycle. Please come. They're here at City Hall, 10:30 again in the morning, and 6:30 p.m. If you wish to.
The evening one is here also.
The evening one is also here in City Hall.
Mr. Reynolds, I've attended those in the past, and Darren does a great job. It's very informative, so I really suggest that everybody who's able to make it, and yeah, Darren's.
And I'd really prefer to do more listening than talking, so the more people we have there, the better,
Yeah.
so.
That is all, sir.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much. Item number 11, other business. Counselor Lehman.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to put a shout out, thank you to Prior Lake, Savage, Shakopee, Metawakanton, Sioux, Prior Lake, Savage, Chaska.
Chaska.
Chaska, Shakopee, Metawakanton, Sioux, and of course, our very own finest Shakopee Fire Department for the fire at the Timber Creek Furniture, First Avenue.
Well, mutual aid, huh?
It was good to see that mutual aid there when you needed it, you know, and it works both ways.
Sure does.
So just a shout out to all them folks, thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah, thanks, appreciate that. I remember our fire in Savage, and Shakopee was the first to roll up on that, and I didn't care whose name was on the truck, just that someone was there to help, so.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if your house is in danger, it does not matter what the name on the side of the darn truck is. They want people there fast, and they want hoses on the fire, and absolutely, we couldn't do it without our neighboring communities.
Great.
Mayor, I guess I fielded a couple of questions on that where some folks said there was too many trucks there. Well, I explained that when, Chaska might have had, or a other entity may have had a couple of trucks sitting there that weren't being used. Ours were all being used, and if somebody else needed a service in town, the capacity was there to
Absolutely.
immediately respond, and that's critical also.
And in a working fire, you're rotating in and out quite
Right,
quickly, so you need the people.
But somebody's got to cover.
Yep, so they cover stations and things, sure.
Absolutely.
And the other
So
communities,
There
right?
is a reason to how it works.
Okay. We're good. Item 12.
I make a
Counselor Brennan.
I make a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, June 18th at 7:00 PM.
I second.
I have a second by Counselor Contreras. Further discussion? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:17.